Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Francesa podcast on the Bet Rivers Network, brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. Casamigos Tequila is brought to you by those who drink it. We come to you this evening on the Mike Francesa channel on the Bet Rivers Network on YouTube, and this was planned once the doubleheader was over to talk about the playoffs, which begin tomorrow. And the two teams in each league, including the Yankees, will wait to see the winners, and then we'll be in action this weekend as we will get the divisional playoff round up. The four teams that get buys, and obviously the Mets are on their way to the playoffs. We'll get to that in a minute. I had scheduled an 8 o'clock podcast or broadcast, and I ran out with my wife to the store, and I came back in, and my phone was blowing up. And obviously, I saw the news, stunning news that I have to say, I went, wow, the passing of Pete Rose. I don't know if Pete was sick. I don't know if this was a heart attack. I mean, may he rest in peace. I don't know what his situation was physically. He was 83 years old, but it clearly has an impact on the sporting world. And on the eve of baseball's big moment, on the eve of October, as baseball goes into its second season and its dramatic, pivotal time, where the games not only are so important, but so good. There is little in sports better than the baseball postseason. The regular season can be tedious at times. We all know that. It has its ups and downs. It has its lulls. It has its good performances. It has its bad. But the postseason is always special, and you don't know what it's going to bring year after year, and it usually brings a very good amount of drama. And on the eve of this, one of the most controversial and iconic baseball figures of the past 50 years passes, and that being Pete Rose. If you don't understand, if Pete Rose is just a name to you, he is someone that you have to understand his impact, because his impact was not only dramatic because of all the controversy about his gambling, his being banned, his not getting in the World Series, his battle with Giamatti, who passed away right after that, his life of denial, and then his public statements and battles and everything else. But you first have to understand Rose the player, and that takes a little doing, because I don't know if there's a more unique player in my lifetime in baseball than Pete Rose. There were players far more talented than Pete Rose. There were players on Pete Rose's great teams that were better players than he was. Mike Schmidt's a better player when he was on the Phillies. Johnny Bench is a better player. I can go down the line, but you can't tell me any of them had a bigger impact on the team they played on the players they played with, or on the games than Pete Rose did. Pete Rose wasn't the best player. He never hit 20 home runs in a season. He never knocked in 100 runs in a season. He wasn't going to put up big numbers in that regard. He was a leadoff hitter. He got more hits than anybody, but he wasn't the best hitter. Pete Rose won 3 batting crowns in his very long career. Pete Rose hit 303 for his career. Hitting 300 is very, very impressive over a very long career. But Tony Gwynn hit 338 and won 8 batting titles. Was he a prolific leadoff man? Well, he scored 100 runs 8 times. But Ricky Henderson scored 100 runs 14 times. So where does Pete Rose stack up and why is he so special? What made him so iconic? Well, first of all, he got the most, so he was the hit leader. Pete Rose never gave up an at bat. He never didn't play. He couldn't keep him off the field. And I don't care what the score was late in the game. That at bat was going to be meaningful to Pete Rose. He was going to try with everything he had to get another hit in the game. If he had one, he wanted two. If he had two, he wanted three. If he had three, he wanted four. If he had four, he wanted five. He was never satisfied. And he was never going to give up a bat. And obviously, he hustled. He ran to first base in a spring training game against the Yankees after a walk. And the veteran and very sophisticated for a baseball player, city wise, Whitey Ford tagged him Charlie Hustle. It stuck. His father saw him once late in the game not give his all going to first base and said, "Don't ever embarrass me again." And Pete Rose had an impact that was far greater than his statistics. He was a winner. He would get the big hit. He would do anything to help his club win the game. He was the grittiest, toughest, orneriest guy. If he was a throwback to anything, he was a throwback to Ty Cobb, who he was compared to many, many times. And Pete Rose, the player, overcame so much to be, without question, a first ballot Hall of Famer because of what he accomplished on the field and how much he won. He liked to brag that he won more games than Joe DiMaggio played in. He liked to talk about how many winning games he played in. It mattered to him. Every win mattered to him. Winning championships mattered to him. Everything mattered to him. And that's why he accomplished what he did, because everything mattered. But of course, he had another side. And the one thing baseball feared, and it's quite ironic in this era of them posting, same game parlays and what the odds are in the fifth inning of the team coming back and how many runs are going to be scored in the game, as they're now in bed with legalized gambling. It's quite ironic that Pete Rose was driven from the sport for gambling, and he was. Because the rule always was, dating back to when the Black Sox took money to throw the World Series, which they did, because a lot of it because of their anger over the frugality and meanness of Charles Comiskey, their owner. But they did. And the rule was there, and it was ironclad. If you bet, you will be banned for life. It was the worst crime you could make against baseball. But I went through those years with Pete Rose, okay? And we were fortunate enough with our show being as prominent as it was. Dog and I got to interview Pete Rose on numerous occasions. And years later, I interviewed him on numerous occasions, and I'm sure Dog interviewed him on numerous occasions. So I got to know Pete pretty well. And every time he was hawking anything and hawking a book, he did a lot of it in our studio, and later years in my studio. And I spent plenty of hours in there talking to him, and I talked to him through plenty of commercials. So I knew him pretty well. And listen, his greatest crime was that he never came clean. They had him dead to right. Dowd had him dead to right. And they were going to punish him because in the beginning, he was adamant about how he didn't bet on baseball. And the baseball people felt that he helped hasten Giamatti's demise, who they loved, but also that he had broken his agreement with Giamatti, that he would not publicly talk about the incident and would not go public with the fact that he didn't bet against didn't bet on baseball because they knew he did. They had him dead. They knew they had records. They had everything. They had records in his own handwriting. But he was adamant about it to the point that it ticked off many Hall of Famers and many baseball executives and many powers that be in baseball. And he went on with this year after year after year, where if he had ever shown remorse, and I watched a report when I came in the house right before I was getting ready to do the show, do this program, and someone said he showed remorse late in his career. I disagree. I don't think Pete ever showed remorse. I think Pete was still playing the game all the way to the end. Now, when he needed the money, he wrote a book that said he bet on baseball, but that was way, way after he had turned even friends against him because of his constant take that he hadn't bet on baseball when everyone knew he had. So he, along that way, was his own worst enemy. He was a degenerate gambler. Where did he spend his time in all these years? In Vegas. Pete Rose, in his prime, did card shows with 3 TVs so he could watch his bets on a Saturday. He loved the racetrack, which a lot of people do, and that's legal gambling. But he did a lot of gambling. And even after the fact, I doubt, and I wasn't around him that much in those years later, except when he was hawking a book, but I'm sure he never stopped gambling. And eventually, he thought things would change because he finally admitted that he bet on baseball. But the problem was, it was way too late. It had turned off so many people and angered so many people that he never, ever saw what he should have seen, which was a plaque in the Hall of Fame, which I think could have been worked out. But there was still a lot of anger on the other side. And they didn't trust him because they knew he was popular, which he always maintained his popularity. No matter what he did, he had his fans because they loved the way he played the game. And they found him to be this colorful character. And he always played the victim very well. He liked to play the victim. Oh, what did I do that was so bad? So what? I bet on baseball. I didn't kill anybody. Well, in baseball's terms, there's nothing worse than having the game not on the level. For what had to drive Pete nuts, and I'm sure it did, because I haven't spoken to him in the last couple of years since baseball has gotten into bed with gambling. That had to annoy the heck out of him to see the odds now posted on the game of the week in the middle of the game, and them pounding same game parlays and betting what the total of the game is and how many strikeouts the starting pitcher is going to have while he's banned from the sport for gambling. But they never wanted Pete back in the game. They didn't trust him, that he wouldn't double cross him. So they never felt comfortable putting him in and then running the fear or running the game that he would wind up back in a uniform somewhere, which they didn't want under any circumstances. So Pete Rose never got to have his day in Canton. But remember, he had a lot of days in Canton. And all they did was tick off everybody at the Hall of Fame and everybody in baseball because he'd be down the block signing autographs with people lined up to show that he could go and be in the People's Hall of Fame. See, that's what baseball should have recognized along the way. In the hearts and minds of its fans, Pete was already in the Hall of Fame. He had accomplished that. No matter what his crimes were, on the field, he had been a Hall of Famer. And that's why there should have been a way to recognize this. It didn't happen. The biggest loser is Pete, but baseball's been a loser too, just like they have been during this whole steroid debacle. because their history has been damaged. Their history has been tarnished, and no sport cherishes or holds its past up like a monument like baseball does. Baseball loves to track the timeline, and they can't do that now without having all these bumps and craters and detours along the road. For a Pete Rose or for a Roger Clemens, Mark McGuire, A Rod, go down the line. So Pete Rose passes. Like I said, in the hearts and minds of baseball fans, he's always been in their Hall of Fame because they know he belonged there as a player. The all time hit leader and winner, an impactful player who played way past his talents and did it with a grit and a determination. He was a leader on the field. He led the Reds to victories. He went to the Phillies, and ask Mike Schmidt, he'll tell you Pete Rose taught me how to win. He knew how to play the game. He played it the way everybody would always like to see everybody play it, with an abandon and a spirit and a grittiness because he cared. He wanted to win that badly. And there were dark moments, even one on the field, because the All Star game, hey, that was just uncalled for because there's no room for that kind of intensity in an All Star game. But I think in those years, they used to glorify certain players playing the All Star game way too much. It's still an exhibition. And a lot of players took it at that, but some players didn't. And Pete is not there to ruin a guy's career in the All Star game, which he did in Ray Fosse. And that was not one of his great moments. But on the field as a player, he had many. He goes to his grave as a very complicated baseball figure and national sports figure. He accomplished so much, and he also made a lot of mistakes. We all make mistakes. And I think Pete could have been forgiven many years ago if he had just not fought it. But I don't think that was in his nature not to fight it. I think he had to always do it his way. And that meant fighting it. Even when he knew it was a fight he couldn't win, he had to fight it. But here's the thing he takes with him for as long as they play this game. They will talk about Pete Rose. And that nobody can take away from him. He passed away tonight at the age of 83. May you rest in peace. For Met fans today, that was a great win. Now, I did not know, and I don't think they mentioned it on the game, and I'm not sure the announcers knew that Sale was not physically up to pitching the second game. So he was always there for the Braves, we thought, if the Mets would win the first game. Now, Mets didn't care about that because if they win the first game, they were in. If they won both games, all you were doing was changing the opponent, and neither opponent's a picnic, although the Mets obviously have had a lot of trouble in Milwaukee, where they will be tomorrow. And let's be honest, the Mets and the Braves and the Diamondbacks, this wasn't a perfect scenario for any of them, but, it's a small price when you realize what the weather has done to other people's lives in North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Yes, these teams are going to go into a tough spot. I don't see how Diaz could pitch tomorrow after throwing as many pitches as he did today. Looks like Sale's not pitching tomorrow. He has back spasms. So these teams are going to be up against it. But hey, the other teams earned the right. They got to the postseason, so they have an opportunity, which is all you can ask for. Is it stacked against those teams right now? Yeah, it probably is. But you know what? Those teams that are on the plus side and the playing home, they've earned that. Now you got to go there and find a way to win. For the Mets today, that first game turned into an, it turned into an all-time classic. It's amazing how you flip the switch to the postseason, and today felt like the postseason, and how unbelievable that game will go down in Met annals. Now, I'm telling you right now, I don't mean to take anything away from the first game victory, which was brilliant, but I don't think there's any way after winning that first game, the other team was not going to win the second game. Braves were going to go bullpen by committee, and the team that won was going to have the kind of at bats where let's just get this thing over with and move on. That was the problem the Diamondbacks were going to have. The odds on there being a 2-game sweep in this thing was going to be pretty tough because the team that won the first game in a grueling first game was going to keep people out, not have people's pitching, which is the biggest key. They had guys in the lineup. And I'm sure there was one moment when the Diamondbacks huddled around wherever they were with their bags packed and a plane waiting on a tarmac somewhere, hoping against hope. And that was when Alonso came up with 2 guys on base because they knew there was one swing where he could have hit a 3-run homer and maybe won that second game. But it didn't happen. He grounded the third on the first pitch. Mets wound up with 3 hits. The first game was a thriller. But I firmly believe, even with all the drama of the first game, what Diaz had to wind up doing, Lindor's brilliant season and brilliant finish, I think the Mets would have won the second game anyway, had they lost the first game. Because I just think the odds on the other team winning when it didn't have to win, and it was just so satisfied from winning the first game and sitting key people out, and you weren't hitting against the best pitchers, although the pitchers didn't pitch badly. It was going to be very tough. So now here we are. If you haven't heard it yet, you know the matchups that you start tomorrow with Detroit at Houston and Kansas City, then at Baltimore, Mets at Milwaukee, and then the Braves at San Diego. Tonight, the Braves are saying Sale will not pitch tomorrow with back spasms. Mets haven't made any statements about Diaz, but I would think Diaz would not be able to go after throwing 39 pitches. I think he threw 39. He might have thrown 40 in the first game. And when he didn't cover first base after the play, I thought, oh, this is going to go down in annals after the bases clearing double. But Lindor came back, and obviously Diaz hung in there and threw 40 pitches. Now, you never see a premium reliever go 40 pitches. Once a year. Once a year. That's a lot. I would think he is a no-go tomorrow. If you're going to try and use him, the day after and maybe the day after in what would be the deciding game. For the teams on the road, hey, you have to look at the bright spot. You're in the postseason. You have an opportunity. It's better than being home. Is it a tall order? It's not easy. No question about it. Detroit had a phenomenal run to get to the postseason. They play a team that knows its way around the postseason better than anybody and know how to win. Kansas City did not play well down the stretch, but neither did Baltimore. The Mets at one point were 22-33. It's amazing what they accomplished, having the best record in baseball after that point, playing over 600 baseball the rest of the way. and having the season that they did, getting into the postseason. There was a couple of scary moments, obviously, this past week, but they won a game, a big game in Atlanta, and now they're going to have to, win in a place where they have obviously fared very, very poorly. And Milwaukee puts a lot of pressure on you. They can pitch, they're athletic, they can run, they will run, they play defense, they're well managed. They're a tough out. But hey, it's the postseason. Not supposed to be any easy outs. The Mets getting there is a tremendous accomplishment in what they accomplished this season. There, the Mets get beat on by me and by a lot of people a lot, but their owner, their general manager, their manager, the team, they completely deserve a great deal of credit for what they've accomplished just making the postseason this year and turning the season around. Lindor had a tremendous season, and you don't want to discount. Although he slumped badly down the stretch, you don't want to discount what Martinez brought to the team in terms of veteran leadership. But without question, the spark plug to this team was Iglesias. I mean, there's absolutely no question. And to me, his hit was the one that really sent that rally into overdrive. I know you got the Nimahoma, but that, you send a kid back to the mound in the eighth. He'd never been in the eighth. He had pitched 7 brilliant innings. He gave up a double to Taylor. Things get started. Okay. But I thought the 0-2 pitch he rifles to right field really turned. That was it. That was the one that to me really changed everything. Absolutely changed everything, as he has done time and time and time again. He has had an amazing season and an incredible impact on the Mets. And the Mets bring a team that, can do a lot. Their starting pitching has been a lot better than anybody could have hoped for. Their lineup is a lot deeper, and they've overcome when guys have slumped. They've been able to overcome it. If Alonso goes in the tank, someone else picks it up. Alvarez went in the tank for a while. Now he comes out. Bader had a lot of big hits early in the season. He has struggled mightily, but Taylor has picked it up. Iglesias, go down the line. They have just gotten it, the power of Vientos. I mean, all the way down the line. They have had versatility. Their manager has utilized their overall roster very, very well. And for the most part, he has his hiccups, but for the most part, Diaz usually finds a way. Now, that October baseball puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. Getting those outs, counting down those outs from 9-0 in tight games in the postseason is what it's all about. Those outs are hard. Just like those outs were hard to come by in game one today, those outs get harder and harder. The more you watch the postseason, the more you know those outs get harder and harder. And that's why when you have a great closer, he's worth his weight in gold, as we saw for year after year with the one and only Mariano Rivera. And he wasn't perfect. He had his moments, but the good so far outweighed the bad. That's why he's who he is and remembered the way he is. But those last 3 outs, when you're up a run or 2 runs in a big game, they just seem to take forever to register. And each one gets harder. And what makes October baseball so special is baseball is the one sport you can slow down you almost have suspense that you can almost suspend time. And at bat, a dramatic at bat, which is tedious in July when the guy fouls off 11 pitches and works a 3-2 count. But in the postseason, in a big spot, that at bat becomes so incredibly dramatic as it unfolds, as you think with the pitcher, all right, he just went here. Now he's going to come here. Or he's just threw this. Now he's going to throw this. Or is he going to throw this? He's going to go back to this. And those at bats are what makes the sport so incredibly special in the postseason. And it is. October baseball's fun. It really is. And this is a big year in New York. Hey, to have both teams in, to have the Mets playing a playoff game tomorrow, to have the Yankees waiting in the wings to welcome somebody to Yankee Stadium on Saturday. That's all you can ask for. After a very, very long season that had its ups and downs for both teams. But a remarkable finish for the Mets. And Stearns deserves a lot of credit. So does the owner. You know, last year, this was put in motion when they made the decision that they made about their big, high-priced starting pitchers. And it turned out to be decisive. It turned out to be a move that a lot of owners wouldn't have made. And it turned out to be right. And then this year they went out and without breaking the bank, so they have plenty of money to spend next year, they went out and added a lot of useful parts and got a lot of people from a lot of places. And that's how you put together a team that makes a run. And now, we'll see what they have left. They have some moxie, which is something you can't always say about the Mets. They do. They do. This team's got a little moxie. And it clearly is a team that is cohesive and plays as a unit and really likes each other. I mean, you can just see it in this team. Led by Lindor, who's had really an incredible, I mean, considering how slow his start was, an incredible season. We'll be with you after game one. Let's let everybody play a game. Let the Mets play a game, and then we will be with you tomorrow after the Mets play. Tomorrow night live. And again, tonight, obviously, everything takes a back seat to the news, the passing of Pete Rose at the age of 83. Just as October is about to begin, loses one of its clearly most recognizable and, without question, its most controversial figure. We'll see you tomorrow.